Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. I still need an exasperated W. I occasionally will throw wearying in there, but there's got to be a better one. To bust out the old thesaurus, see if I can find something. Anyway, I'm Robert Winfrey. It is currently Sunday, November 17th, and I hope you're all having a good whatever time you happen to be listening to this. On the agenda for this evening, we'll be talking about yesterday's event, UFC on ESPN Plus 22. Ugh. I kind of went to bat for that event. I said, hey, there's a couple of fights on here that might be pretty good. And then, in all fairness, at least two of the ones that I said might be pretty good are like highlights of the overall event. But, oh, man. What a dull event. That main event is probably one of the three worst main events of the year, off the top of my head. Anyway, we'll get into that. Also, whatever news that came out over the last week, there were a few things that made some noise, but there's not a tremendous volume of news to talk about, so we'll get into that. And that'll pretty much be it. There will not be a show like this next week because the UFC is taking a couple of weeks off. Their next event is their return to the DC area, the Washington DC area, on the 7th of December. So we'll be back for this show on the 1st, but next Sunday I'll save that for the end of the show. I'll make you guys stick around to tell you what I've got kind of planned for that. But there is something that will be released on this channel, MMA related, that I hope you'll all enjoy. But again, I'll save that for later. Here with me, per usual, is my regular partner in crime, 411 Mania's jack of all trades, Jeffrey Harris, is still alive and kicking, despite the fact that his poor Houston Astros are about to be fined, sued, and suspended into oblivion.
Fake news. Second of all, thank you, MMA fans, for joining us as we take a trip deeper into the unknown.
Alrighty.
Well, it is sour grapes, by the way, for teams that aren't as good as us. I want proof that none of the other teams are doing if you're gonna suspend the Astros, suspend the Boston Red Sox.
I'd be okay with that. I don't have a dog in the hunt, but
Were the Boston Red Sox not accused of doing the same thing and nothing?
I don't know. I don't follow it enough. I just know that's a thing that happened. And I know you're a big Astros fan, so that's all that led to that.
Fake news.
Alrighty, let's go ahead and jump into UFC on ESPN Plus 22 then. Your main event, such as it was, Jan Blachowicz defeated Ronaldo Jacare Souza. This was Jacare's move up to light heavyweight. Defeats him via split decision. There were 48-47s. Again, 2 for Blachowicz, 1 for Jacare. Yeah, this fight sucked.
But
now,
how did you see the fight? Did you think this was the correct winner?
Yeah. Scoring it live, I think I went 4-1 for Blachowicz. I only gave Jacare the first. You could give him the second reasonably. I don't think that's wrong. I think the swing round wound up being the third, but the fourth and fifth pretty clearly went to Blachowicz.
Blachowicz did not earn a title shot last night. Let's just say that.
He didn't better his position all that much, that's for sure. Normally this has become one of the things I try to do with bad fights. I try to find something positive to talk about just because I was unbelievably negative, and in many respects deservedly so, I maintain, about the Tyron Woodley versus Damian Maia fight, which I still maintain is essentially the worst UFC welterweight title fight ever. Now, that said, welterweight as a division...
That's my takeaway from this. Guys fought.
Yeah, the point being there that welterweight has had a lot of genuinely great title defenses. In fact, arguably two of the best title defenses in any weight class in UFC history. So there's a high bar there, but again, long point being, There was some interesting stuff that Tyron Woodley did in that fight with Maia that I thought, okay, I should be able to find something interesting to discuss, even if it's a squibbly little detail. I don't have a whole lot here. I just don't. Blachowicz had good takedown defense, as was expected. Jacare slowed down as the fight went on, as somewhat expected. While he can fight for 5 rounds, he's never been a cardio king. Just a lot of nothing happened. A lot of clinching that didn't lead to much. A lot of leg kicks and a lot of staring. I don't have anything really interesting that I can say either man did, in all honesty. Blachowicz wins. He is in the title picture by virtue of his general standing more than anything else. And in all fairness to him, he's I think like 7-1 or 6-1 over his last.
The last 2 wins were guys making their debut at light heavyweight. They were the guys he fought and beat were contenders at middleweight in the past. Rockhold, a former middleweight champion, yes, but not really by no means light heavyweight contenders.
No, the last genuine light heavyweight sort of contender he fought was Thiago Santos, and he got finished.
Beat Krylov and Manoa last year. I'd say, if we're talking about the title picture, I'd say the most deserving contender right now is Dominic Reyes.
Yeah, that fight between Jones and Reyes is being worked on for the first not the first pay-per-view, but February, I think, of 2020 is what I saw.
But Blachowicz, if he can be consistent, he might be in that mix very soon. We'll see.
I mean, again, it's light heavyweight. All you need is a pulse and a winning record at this point, and the pulse is optional.
Well, he has a 2-fight winning record, and as you pointed out, he's 7-1 in his last 8. So,
and again, the only loss was to Santos, who went on to fight for the belt.
Yeah. So he's got some things going for him. So.
This is one of those bizarre instances where if he had never taken this fight, he would have had more momentum based on the highlight reel nature of his knockout over Rockhold than winning just the most uninspired split decision ever. I shouldn't say ever.
It wasn't an inspiring card, you know?
It really wasn't. Again, there were a few good things, and again, you and I both, when we talked about this card last week, said, okay, here's about 3 things that, these might be pretty good. This is pretty decent. And I think those 3 things largely played out as decent.
There wasn't too many surprises here. I wasn't expecting Jacare to get the win. I don't know if light heavyweight is his ideal weight class, but it didn't. Look, Jacare, he's almost 40. Moving up in weight didn't really give him much of an advantage here, other than maybe he was a little more comfortable in training camp and, didn't have to starve himself as much. But he didn't look better at all moving up, don't you think?
He still looks like Jacare, which in and of itself is kind of a difficult thing. There's a lot of guys who
looked that sharp last night. He didn't look faster. He didn't look stronger by any margin. It was not a great performance.
No, some of that's the level of opposition because again, Blachowicz is largely uninspiring, but a really, really good fighter, all things considered.
Technical. He's technical. I don't know.
He's also a bad.
Yeah.
Just a bad style matchup for Jacare because Jacare wants to get you down, work on the ground more than anything. And Blachowicz would do this thing that's very annoying to a lot of people, myself included, where he would kind of put himself on the fence or let himself get walked back into it. But I think against Jacare that was at least partially by design because Blachowicz' takedown defense against the cage with that barrier there is excellent. In open space, it's not. The presence of that barrier changes a lot of things. The number of fighters in MMA more broadly whose grappling game, when they have the fence there to play with versus when they don't, it changes the dynamic radically. I mean, Roosevelt Roberts, if he gets taken down against the fence, is almost guaranteed to regain his feet within about 15 to 20 seconds. Give or, again, approximately. Some of that varies depending by opponent, how late they are in the fight. But point being, he gets up very, very quickly if he's got the fence to use. Anytime he gets taken down in open space, the equation is, again, radically different, and he is not nearly as dynamic about regaining his feet. And I think Blachowicz in this instance used the fence and wanted to use the fence to help aid his takedown defense rather than risk being too much in open space until the fight wore on a little bit. And Jacare's never been a great double leg guy anyway. He's usually been much more of a clinch guy where he can hit reaps or transition along the fence into a takedown. And he was able to utilize that here and just kind of nullify most of Jacare's game. But he was very hesitant. Jacare was very hesitant. It was just not a very engaging fight. But I think Jacare was kind of the last of the, middleweight old guard that was moving up. And I'm still curious to see what else he can do in this division against a different level of opposition. But a lot of the, guys who were just sick of the weight cut, who seem to think that they could come in and just kind of run over the upper level rank and file at light heavyweight. That has not been a narrative that played out at all. So if I'm Blachowicz, I stay healthy in case something happens to Reyes or John Jones for that fight, because he should probably be the first guy on deck, if something happens to that fight.
As much as you hate to say it.
Sure. Corey Anderson exists. That's true. So yeah, one of those two is probably the next guy up if something happens to Reyes or Jones. If you wanted to do a short notice thing.
The Disney 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is a really good movie. Even if Nemo is I guess arguably not the best, most racially sensitive casting for its time, but it is a good performance. But classic movie, I think.
Dude, that whole movie is justified just by that performance by Kirk Douglas, that little sea shanty he sings on the boat.
Kirk Douglas is fantastic in this movie. They don't make him like Kirk Douglas anymore, Robert.
They don't, and it's kind of a shame. All right, moving on. We have in the co-main event, also in the light heavyweight division, Mauricio Shogun Rua and Paul Craig went to a split draw. In all honesty, Shogun's lucky to get that. Scores were a 29-28 for each man and then a 28-28 draw. I'm more on board with the 28-28 draw than I am 29-28 for Shogun. I think you can give Shogun the third round, which is kind of the swing round. Craig dominates the first round enough that I gave him a 10-8, and one of the judges did. And I think under the new scoring criteria, which is the criteria being used last night, that is the correct score for round one. Craig dominates and wins by a wide enough margin to warrant that from where I was sitting. Shogun gets the second. A lot of top control, some decent ground and pound in places. Second round for Shogun. Third round, Shogun spends a lot of it on top, but does nothing. Gets hit several times on the feet, gets taken down into side control, and then worked over a little bit as the round ended. So the third round becomes the swing round. I have no issues with the draw, in all honesty. Because I think, again, you can give Shogun the third, but I But since I think Craig should have got a 10-8 first, then we get the score result is a draw. Again, a moderately engaging first round when Craig was kind of running over things, and then after that, it just slows down throughout the rest of the fight. I don't have a whole lot here. Jeff, you didn't seem too upset with the draw result for this fight either, did you?
James Mason is really good as Captain Nemo in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And you can watch it right now on Disney+. It's something else you can watch besides The Mandalorian. Shogun and Paul Craig had a fight. It was a draw. There you go.
All right, our only finish of the main card, Charles Oliveira defeats Jared Gordon via knockout punches, 1 minute and 26 seconds into the first round. Charles Oliveira, your all-time leader in submission finishes in UFC history. Now the sole owner of second place for most finishes in general in UFC history at 15, only one behind Donald Cerrone at 16. This fight was a bit of a mismatch on paper. It played out like a mismatch in practice. Charles Oliveira is really, really good against...
Where does this put Charles Oliveira, you think? Where does this put Charles Oliveira in the picture of the lightweight division?
He was ranked, I believe, 13th coming into this fight.
Mm-hmm.
You had Gregor Gillespie.
6 wins in a row.
You had Gillespie, who was ranked above him, lose to Lee. With some other lightweight fight that played out recently that had a little bit of a shakeup. He's probably going to be around 10. And for the love of all that's holy, can we get this guy fighting somebody, some ranked opposition? Look, I've said this about Charles Oliveira for a while. He looks really good against guys of this level. And that's not a knock on Jared Gordon, who would smash me into a million pieces if we ever fought. But he gets on these...
Give him a big fight, you know? He deserves a big fight.
Yeah, I would like to see him fight Kevin Lee.
Wouldn't be terrible, but Kevin Lee, after beating Gillespie, like just vanquishing Gillespie, he's probably going to be angling for a bigger fight next.
You know what? Or Gillespie.
What about Felder or Hooker?
He already fought Felder, and Felder smashed him.
Hooker, then, is someone like Hooker.
I mean, let me be clear, I wouldn't hate the rematch with Felder. I'm more interested in seeing the Hooker fight. But give him...
He hasn't fought Hooker or an ally Iaquinta. He hasn't fought Iaquinta, I don't think, either.
No, I don't think he has. But this guy has spent a long time kind of rebuilding himself. And in all fairness, lightweight is not a division that you can easily do that. You fight a lot of unknown guys at lightweight who are really good.
But he has, and he's been doing a great job as of late.
But
he's looking more like the prospect we thought he was going to be 10 years ago.
Yeah. I think it's time we take the kid gloves off with him at this point. Let's get him in there against some of the top-level guys, and let's find out if he's actually going to make anything of this current run or not.
Because, I mean, there was a time where he was one of the more exciting prospects at lightweight, and then, you know, he had a run where he tried to be a featherweight for a while, didn't really pan out. Now he's back at lightweight, and he's looking good. I won't say he's looking like $1 million, but he's been looking pretty good lately.
Yeah. His last few fights, he has looked solid. Can I just say I found him calling out Conor McGregor hilarious? Yeah, there's no way, buddy. No way.
I mean, who knows? Well, I mean, you might as well.
Conor's not coming back to fight that guy. He's just not.
I mean, he's not coming back to fight Khabib or Tony Ferguson or any of the guys he should be fighting. So, quite frankly, honestly, Robert, I don't think an Oliveira-McGregor fight would be the worst thing for either guy.
It'd be a nice win for Conor. But it's also a fight with zero hype behind it. Sure, the presence of McGregor would draw a lot of attention.
The reason I don't mind, just the idea. I like it because, I mean, I feel like Conor maybe shouldn't be in a top 5 fight right now because he's been away from the sport for too long.
I would on a meritocratic level, I agree with you.
To me, it's not just about meritocracy. It's just that to me, it could be in Conor's interest as well.
In some respects, it would be, but in some respects, it's also not something he's going to do.
As long as he takes the fight seriously.
I mean, he's not going to come back for anything less than a main event. He's not going to come back for anything less than a pay-per-view main event. And at this point in time,
why not just pay? Why not bring Conor back to Ireland?
Because he'd lose out on money.
Pay him like you would for a pay-per-view. Then you mean to tell me you couldn't work something out like that?
They might be able to. The question is whether or not they're willing.
I feel with Conor McGregor you could do that. I don't see. Look, when is the last time he's not at this rate? He's not even fighting this year, Robert.
No, he's not going to fight in 19.
So I mean, I think it's ridiculous to put him in like a title level fight at this point. It's falling. I'm sorry.
I'm not saying he should be in a title fight, but he's not going to take a run of the mill fight. And Charles Oliveira is as run-of-the-mill as they come.
Fighting a top 5 opponent right now would be promotional malpractice.
And yet, that's what they would have to do.
Well,
or the trilogy fight with Nate Diaz.
Even that, I think, is a bad idea right now.
I mean, I didn't like their first 2 fights.
Diaz has been more active this year.
Yeah, and Diaz is going to sit out for probably the majority of 2020 now. And I don't begrudge him that. If that's what he wants to do, fine and dandy. But
I begrudge him.
I don't.
I thought he's been fathering all these little guys for years.
Spiritually he has maybe, but he doesn't. Look, I would only begrudge him something if I felt I was owed anything. Nate doesn't owe me anything.
Okay.
Well, look, if Conor comes back, it's for the Diaz trilogy, a title shot, however profoundly unlikely, or a fight that will get him immediately into the title picture while also being a substantial moneymaker. I think at this point, again, you have Diaz. I'm still kind of annoyed they couldn't get him and Cowboy together because I like that fight.
I still think they should book that fight too, honestly.
I mean, again, you can easily make that a very, very prominently featured fight. You could main event a pay-per-view with that. You could. It's McGregor. He commands that kind of prestige and attention. It's a winnable fight for both guys.
Cowboys deserve that fight just because it doesn't seem likely Cowboy's ever going to fight for the title. But to me, this is the next best thing that you could realistically book.
Yeah,
and it would be a fight for the fans.
Oh yeah, I mean, come on, that's a great fight to look forward to. Maybe you could maybe the Gaethje fight would be another one.
Yeah,
but the options for him from a realistic standpoint for Conor are somewhat limited. And
I mean, in terms of matchup, I would favor, if I'm Conor's management, I would favor a fight like Cerrone over Gaethje.
Oh yeah, me too.
If I'm Audie Attar, I would be diligently trying to get either the Cerrone fight or even a fight like Oliveira, because they match up with Conor better.
Again, there's too little upside to Oliveira. You go in and you beat Cerrone. Sure, he's
then it's the Cerrone fight. So I don't know. I just don't know what Conor's doing or what he wants right now.
Yeah, and if we did, that would be a great thing, but we don't. I think we can just do quick hits for the rest of this card because that was
This
kind of
is one of the greatest MMA cards of the year.
Oh god, stop. Anyone selling you that line is a company show, for the record. All right, Andre Muniz defeated Antonio Arroyo via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Meh. Wellington Turman defeated Marcus Perez via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Double meh. James Krause defeated Sergio Moraes via knockout punches, 4:19 of the third round. Decent fight, good showing from Krause. He was just superior technically and kind of broke Moraes down over the course of the fight. Ricardo Ramos defeated Luis Eduardo Garagori via submission rear naked choke in the first round, 3:57. As expected, Ramos has proven himself a genuine UFC caliber fighter. Garagori had a decent, if forgettable, UFC debut. Francisco Trinaldo defeated Bobby Green via unanimous decision, 30-27 and 29-28. Awkward fight. Really awkward fight. Awkward fight to score, too. I think I scored it for Green. I can't remember off the top of my head. And Green numerically outstruck Trinaldo in the second and third rounds by pretty significant margins. Just awkward. Randy Brown defeated Warley Alves via triangle choke in the 122 of the second round. Nice finish for Randy Brown, who kind of got worked over a little bit in the first. Douglas Silva de Andrade defeated Renan Barão via unanimous decision. 2 30-27s, 1 30-26. The 30-26 at 10-8 in the third would be appropriate. Barão just doesn't seem to have it anymore. And Silva de Andrade, especially as that fight wore on, just kind of kept getting to him over and over and over again. Ariane Lipski defeated Isabella de Padua via unanimous decision, 30-26, 30-26, 29-27. De Padua missed weight by like 5 pounds. In fairness, she took the fight on like a day's notice, day and a half maybe. She got worked by Lipski, who continues to be largely useless off of her back. But her takedown defense isn't good enough to consistently stay vertical. If she really wants to do something in the UFC, she's got to get a handle on that. The 10-8s, for the record, the 10-8s there in that fight largely stemmed from an illegal upkick that Padua landed and was deducted a point for in the second round. And Tracy Cortez defeated Vanessa Mello to kick everything off. 2 30-27s, 1 29-28. Another forgettable women's bantamweight fight. I don't know what else to tell you. All right, Jeff, anything stand out to you? Any burning desires from that group of fights?
Yeah. Pedro Pascal did an interview. And he just casually revealed the real name of the Mandalorian, the new Star Wars show on Disney+. Like just casually. Like this is like one of Lucasfilm's most closely guarded secrets for the past year. And he just casually drops it without anyone even asking him in an interview. He just casually says it. Who does that? Who does that, honestly?
I would have done it.
He thinks he's like Mark Ruffalo. Like why would he do that? Like just casually spoils his character's name. Like, oh, we're not even going to say this character's name. Oh, it's this. Well, thanks a lot for spoiling the show, Pedro Pascal.
Is his character's name at any point relevant to the plot of the series?
It's very relevant because it's the character's name, and we don't even know the character's name yet.
No. That's like a marketing gimmick. I mean, for the narrative, from a narrative standpoint, is there a big mystery?
Yes, because he's this mysterious Mandalorian, and we don't even know who he is or where he's from.
Okay. We may not know that, but does it matter?
Yes, it matters. The character's name matters because they won't say his name. So I think finding out...
Is there a reason they won't say his name, or is it just because they don't?
Because they don't.
Okay, then who cares if he spoils it? It doesn't actively detract from anything.
Because it's probably going to be a major reveal when it happens. That's why.
Was it?
It hasn't happened yet. That's the thing. So
then it's not a relevant plot point. So who cares if it's spoiled?
It's relevant if it's a major relevant reveal in the show, then it is relevant.
Okay, if there's a second season and they stage an entire story arc around around what his real identity is, then okay, I'll agree with you.
It might be in this season. I don't know. We're only 2 episodes in. We're not even halfway through the season.
Oh, did they not dump all of it at once?
No, it's the Disney Plus shows they're doing on a weekly release. It's not like that.
Oh God, what a giant waste of time. Okay. Well, that would be another reason I haven't watched it.
I just don't get like how he just voluntarily spoils the character's real name, just voluntarily like that, like he's Mark Ruffalo or something.
Well, again, if it doesn't matter to the narrative, then who cares? I mean, really, if
Robert, you don't get this Star Wars thing, do you?
I am not a Star Wars fan. That is true.
Kind of like you don't get this whole Astros are innocent thing.
I don't know enough to have an opinion on that.
Okay. Well, now you know the Astros are innocent.
I know that is what you think.
That is what I know. I know my truth.
Yeah, but there's not your truth. There's just the truth.
Which is also my truth.
No, reality does not reshape itself to your needs.
Does now.
No. Sadly. Believe me, if I could make reality change to suit my needs, I would. All right. That was UFC on ESPN Plus 22. So thanks to everyone who read and followed along live or read after the fact. I appreciate you guys a lot.
Megyn Kelly turns 49 tomorrow. Did you know that?
I don't know who that is.
She's a news reporter, anchor, like a TV person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good for her continuing to exist.
So that was a UFC card. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, it was. That's about how interesting it was too, guys. I apologize if our little rabbit holes you might what are they doing? There's just not a lot in that card to dissect, so I apologize, but we can always just hope the next one's better.
We should just make the rest of this show like a Mandalorian review show.
I have not seen any of it, consequently I have no perspective.
Okay, so then I would be spoiling the show for you.
You're only spoiling it for me if it would somehow affect my decision to watch it or my enjoyment doing so. I care not at all about spoilers.
Okay. I think you should watch The Mandalorian, though.
I might when it's all been released.
Okay.
All right, let's see. Jumping into some news of the week. I don't have a whole lot to say here, but I suppose we should, just because it's one of those things. Nick Diaz gave a long, rambling, incoherent interview with Ariel Helwani. And let me be clear about something. When I say long, rambling, and incoherent, I'm not holding that to the standard of the average human being. I'm actually holding that to the standard of Nick Diaz. Even by his own standards, this one was rambling, borderline incoherent, and a little bit all over the place.
I've never heard a coherent Nick Diaz interview.
It's a somewhat relative assessment. I know a lot of people came out of that interview going, "Yeah, we really want to see Nick Diaz fight Jorge Masvidal." What's the matter with you people?
I mean, do you hate Nick Diaz that much?
Nick Diaz does not look like he's in fighting shape. All of his recent social activities do not appear that he has been keeping himself in fighting shape. And let me be clear, okay, man, if you want to go party, no judgment. But there's a reason most fighters don't engage in that on that kind of consistent a level, a consistent basis. And look, man, Nick I know some people were saying he sounded drunk. And let me be clear, drunk in this instance would be drunk for Nick Diaz, who's always had a very idiosyncratic speech pattern, quality to his voice, so on and so forth. This interview, what I saw of it,
sounding drunk would be an improvement for Diaz.
well, you'd think, but this interview did not inspire me with a tremendous desire to see him fight again. Not at all. I do not necessarily get the reaction that people had to this, to arm to man a post and be part of the Diaz army again. And yeah, he's gonna fight freaking Jorge Masvidal. And look, the best version of Nick Diaz.
Last fight was 2015. We're coming right up on 5 years.
Yeah, the Silva fight, right?
So basically, reducing that suspension was basically pointless. So whatever.
Look, I think the best version of Nick Diaz against the current version of Jorge Masvidal is an incredibly compelling matchup.
It makes no sense.
But we're not dealing with the best version of Nick Diaz. You won't get the best version of Nick Diaz if he fights. You're going to get the contemporary version of Nick Diaz. I am not at all interested in watching him fight again.
Here's what he said. It's on you folks. It's on you, Dana. It's on you, UFC. It's on them. It's in your hands now. Cowboy Stadium. So he wants a fight in Cowboy Stadium, I guess.
That seems to be his indicated preference. I don't know. Again, there was a lot of hay that got made out of this interview.
I mean, it's Nick Diaz. He has a cult of fans. It was his first major interview in a while. I can see why it would get attention, but to me, you only make. If fans would actually root for a fight right now against him and Masvidal, his fans must really secretly hate Nick Diaz. Because that would not be good for his long-term health.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you listen to this interview and then compare it with other interviews he's done, he sounds more disjointed than he has previously. Whether that's the long-term effects of brain trauma setting in, whether that's some kind of substance abuse. I mean, maybe it was, and look, I'll be fair, maybe he was just having a weird day.
Or it could be a combination of all those things. Who knows?
Yeah. I have no desire to watch that man fight again after this. Just none.
I've never really been a big Diaz brothers fan, so
I can appreciate elements of their style, and they've had some engaging fights, but I've never gravitated towards either of them as from a fan perspective either. And yeah, Nick seems like there's a lot of elements about just his life that he needs to get sorted out rather than, and I don't mean that negatively, okay? We've all got things we can all work on all the time.
Fighting is probably better for his long-term health anyway.
Yeah. I mean, fighting is actively detrimental to your long-term health.
Right. So, I mean, I think it's probably for the best that he hasn't fought in so many years and him not getting into a fight again. So, there you go.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. A couple of fights have been announced for the UFC event. I think it's the first one they've got on the schedule for 2020 right now. Their event in, I think it's Raleigh, North Carolina. That event now has a main event and a much better co-main event. I believe it's the co-main event. Your main event, as currently listed, is a heavyweight fight between Junior Dos Santos and Curtis Blaydes. Not a bad fight. I don't want that.
Guys.
I don't want that to be the main event for a very specific reason. Also announced this week.
Impact matchup or why?
Because also announced for that same card this week, the bantamweight debut of Frankie Edgar versus Corey Sandhagen, which seems like a fight that it was made for 5 rounds.
I don't know. I think Frankie I like that fight being 3 rounds. Frankie's first time at bantamweight, his age. I think it's better it's 3 rounds.
I almost guarantee by the end of that fight, if it goes 3, we're gonna go, man, I wish we had 2 more. By direct contrast, if JDS and Blaydes.
Here's my point, though. At Frankie's age, trying out a new weight class the first time in his career, with what he's put his body through over the last 10 years, I'm glad it's 3 rounds. I'm glad he's training for 3 rounds.
I mean, if this were some kind of short notice thing, I'd agree, but there's more than enough time for him to get properly prepared.
Frankie's 38 now, Robert, and he's only now making a go at bantamweight.
And it's not going to get any easier if he beats Sandhagen.
Yeah, so I would rather him trying it out for the first time now at this stage in his life. I'd rather be at 3 rounds now.
I want that fight to be 5 rounds. I just do.
Have to disagree.
And in no small part, because if Curtis Blaydes and JDS go out of the 3rd round, we're going to be wishing it ended sooner.
Honestly, I like Sandhagen for this fight.
It's a tough one. I'm kind of with you as far as leaning that way, but Sandhagen's takedown defense has not been demonstrated to be all that good just yet. And some of that might have been a function of the people he was fighting, rather than fighting someone like Frankie, who you really don't want to be under.
Sandhagen's looked great so far. He's coming off a big win, so it's a big fight for both guys. Is this fight going to be ESPN Plus or ESPN? Do we know yet?
It is not yet announced.
Okay. 2 good fights, though. 2 relevant fights. I like it.
Yeah, I like both of those fights. Again, I'd rather heavyweight fights didn't go long, especially when they involve not the top 3 of the division.
Blaydes is not like, I mean, he's not a cardio machine like Stipe, but he has decent cardio.
He's been all right over 3-round fights.
Right. And Junior has too.
Well, Junior's gone 5 before and been okay through all 5.
Right.
That fight does not strike me as something that's going to get better as time goes on.
Right. But I mean, you have 2 top heavyweights there. I can kind of see the logic.
I mean, Junior's a former champion, and Junior's a bigger name than Frankie is. That's just kind of the reality of it.
Curtis Blaydes is a bigger name than Sandhagen at this point.
I'm not sure that's true, but it might be.
Okay. Other news.
Right.
is no longer a UFC fighter. I can't really take issue with this. He's gone on an 0-5 stretch. When was his last UFC win, anyway?
He beat Diego Sanchez.
And that was in 2013, correct?
I believe so.
Because part of that was in there. He had a suspension for testing positive for testosterone metabolites. Though it's USADA, so make of that what you will.
He didn't contest it.
He did not, but neither
for whatever value you want to give that.
Neither did Lyoto Machida, who you think was innocent. Edson Barboza.
Hang on. I don't think Machida's innocent. I think Machida got railroaded by a somewhat fraudulent system, given the substance
Maybe Melendez got railroaded.
No, I do not believe Melendez got railroaded. I don't know that he for sure that he was actively cheating, but
said Melendez didn't argue his suspension. Neither did Machida.
Machida voluntarily self-referred for a substance that should not be on the banned list to begin with.
He did not dispute the ruling. No, he accepted the punishment, and he did not dispute it.
No, he probably should have, but he didn't.
Okay. His last 3 losses were all decisions. Edson Barboza, Stevens, Arnold Allen.
He's been worked in all of those fights. Yeah. He's not an elite level fighter anymore.
He was fighting at featherweight, and I mean, look, for a time, undeniably, he was one of the best lightweights in the world.
There's a very cogent argument that he beat Benson, that he should have won the decision against Benson Henderson and been the lightweight champion.
Right. But it was a close fight, and he slowed down after the first couple rounds. I feel like he checked out after he re-upped. He kind of mentally checked out.
If it wasn't when he re-upped, it was certainly after he lost to Anthony Pettis. Some combination of those two events, and he just wasn't really there anymore.
He was that Eddie Alvarez fight, that was a big fight. A lot of people wanted to see that fight. That was a fight we wanted to see when both guys were champions in Strikeforce and Bellator.
Mm-hmm.
Happened, was a very uneventful, kind of underwhelming fight. And then he just kind of went into a slow and steady decline, and his career never recovered. In many ways.
Yeah, between time off, some injuries, the drug test issues, he just never got back on track.
Now, we can argue the effects and benefits of steroids. Do you think if he was using steroids, they gave him some sort of mental benefit?
I can't speak to the placebo effect as far as that goes. I don't know. That's something that will affect every person differently.
It kind of reminds me of Renan Barão, who also lost last night.
I think in the case of Melendez, it was a lot more accumulation of wear and tear. And I mean, you and I both remember his 3 fights with Josh Thompson in Strikeforce, which were, kind of wars.
He was slowing down a little bit in Strikeforce toward the end.
Yeah, I don't think, again, when you track Melendez's career decline, it makes sense given, again, accumulated damage, level of opposition. And again, some of those fights that he lost, it's more an issue that he just didn't look great. Mm-hmm. So the game might have passed him by in some respects. I think there's a lot more of that kind of goes into Melendez's downturn, whereas Barão just lost one fight and went off a cliff.
Do you think Melendez continues fighting?
You could do the rematch between him and Benson Henderson in Bellator.
Or a rematch with Eddie Alvarez in ONE FC.
I don't know. He's got, I don't know, I believe he still has the kind of the ESPN gig. He does some of the analytical shows.
Right.
I don't know if that's contingent on him not fighting elsewhere. I don't know if, what kind of relationship that might have. I don't know whether or not he even really wants to continue fighting as far as that goes. That kind of remains to be seen.
Well, he did okay. He wasn't able to become a UFC champion. He fought for the UFC title twice. Came up short both times. Was a top-ranked lightweight fighter. Was a Strikeforce champion. He got to do quite a bit, all things considered. Not saying the guys, the Strikeforce champions were bad. They were good fighters. And, look at Luke Rockhold. But you never know when, someone's just going to hit a sudden decline. Because Renan Barão. Look, I cannot explain what happened to Renan Barão. But he was not the same fighter ever since that fight with TJ Dillashaw 5 years ago. And I think you would agree.
I think the bigger problem is that in a lot of respects he is the same fighter. And the sport has just evolved beyond him.
I can't agree with that because before that fight, he looked, he had an aura that was reminiscent to me of Anderson Silva. And he had a defensive technique where you couldn't get inside with him. You couldn't take him down. And guys just weren't able to figure him out. And to me, something was different after that fight with Dillashaw. He didn't look as confident, and he didn't look as terrifying. That's what I think.
I'm sure he lost something mentally over the course of that. I also think he's a fighter who hasn't evolved his game in 6 years.
Sure,
And
sure.
that's kind of a death knell in the sport.
Maybe. I'm not saying I want Renan Barão to get cut, but I mean, like, how can you argue with these results? He just has not looked good.
Fighting him in the UFC at this point is not doing him any favors.
I would, if he were to get cut next, I would not argue against Barão getting cut either. And I can't argue against Gilbert Melendez getting cut either.
No, like, these are guys that had good runs to varying degrees of success. Both of them for quite long periods of time.
But I would argue that going 0-5, that's very lean in the UFC. Very lean.
Yeah, you should be gone at that point. You just should. Like, that is demonstrable evidence that you are not a full-on UFC caliber fighter anymore. And in the case of Barão, it's also not like he's gone 0-5 against the top of the heap. Like, he lost to Andre Ewell very recently.
Right.
I mean, sure, Silva de Andrade is a tank and a really tough out, but
not a top level guy. He's 4-3, and this was his fourth. He was 3-3 going into that fight last night.
Yeah. So again, you're not losing to the elite of the division. Like, you lose 5 fights in a row against top 10 guys. Okay, like, that's bound to happen. You start losing to guys making their debuts, then we got a problem. And that's where Barão is right now.
Khabib Nurmagomedov said at the UFC Moscow Q&A that he's in talks to fight Tony Ferguson. Please let this fight happen. Please, I really want this fight to happen this time. It needs to happen, Robert.
I don't disagree with you. That's been, in my estimation, the best fight you can make in the sport for the last 4 years. I want to see that fight.
Okay, and
anyone that says otherwise is lying to you or profoundly ignorant.
And I think you also wanted to discuss Miocic was on Ariel Helwani's ESPN.
Oh yeah.
So said he wants to fight Tyson Fury. Well, said, let's see. He's interested in a fight or boxing match with Tyson Fury. Fury said statement to MMA Fighting. Stipe says he wants to box me. That would be a good fight for sure.
In other news, Tyson Fury likes free money.
Well, of course. I mean, who doesn't like free money, Robert?
But in this case, let me be very clear. When I say free money, Fury would box circles around Stipe in a boxing ring.
Right.
I am beyond sick of this MMA fighter versus boxer rigmarole.
Conor won 4 rounds against Floyd.
I gave him 2.
He won 2 rounds against one of the greatest boxers of all time.
A near 50-year-old, past his prime, Floyd Mayweather.
Since when is Floyd near 50 years old?
He's 40-something.
He's 42, okay?
Okay, he was 40 when they fought.
Okay,
Almost.
so that's not... 40 is not near 50 in this century, pal.
Okay, not near 50, but over 40.
Over 40.
Well past his prime.
Okay.
Hadn't fought in how many years?
For Floyd?
Yeah, how many years between his previous fight and the McGregor fight?
Less than 2.
That's still a lot in boxing.
All right.
Look, there was a one-off novelty. Here's the reality. If anybody in MMA could consistently box at the elite level, that's what they do. There's so much more money to be made. So much more money.
But it's hard to be an elite level boxer.
Yeah, that's why you can command so much money. Look, the same week, Masvidal said he wanted to box Canelo. Okay, I get it. Masvidal's fight at UFC 2 for Masvidal's fight at UFC 244, he made $500,000. It's a lot of money to
Basically,
make.
I believe like any high-level MMA fighter fighting like a high-level boxer, for that MMA fighter, I feel it would not be good for the MMA fighter.
You get into a boxing ring with a boxing specialist, you're probably going to lose. And again, my point there was Masvidal made $500,000 for the biggest fight of his career on one of the biggest stages of the year, if not the biggest. And that same night, in a fight that had to be delayed 90 minutes so as not to compete with his, Canelo Alvarez made like $35 million. If anybody in MMA could consistently box at the elite level, they wouldn't be fighting in MMA. They would be boxing and making a lot more money. That's the reality of it. There's no reason not to. Miocic says he wants to box Tyson Fury because he might be able to negotiate a fat paycheck. Maybe he wants to challenge himself athletically. I mean, okay, you can get in the ring with the guy. You can look like an idiot. And sure, you'll make a lot of money. But there's almost no chance for Stipe to beat Tyson Fury in a boxing match. Masvidal against Canelo in a boxing match. I've been very critical of Canelo in a lot of ways, but I like Jorge, all things considered. But if they get into a boxing ring together, buddy, Canelo's been boxing almost his entire life at a very, very high level. And you know, you've been fighting in mixed martial arts, and they're different sports. And does the pay discrepancy at the elite level suck? Yeah, you want to do something about it, you know what you have to do.
Rose Namajunas was on Ariel Helwani's show. She says she still wants to fight again, so hopefully we'll see her in a good fight again soon. I like that. I'm glad she'll continue fighting. I hope she's doing well.
I am utterly ambivalent to her fighting again at this point in time. I hope she is in a good place personally, more than anything else. If she comes back and fights, fair enough. If she doesn't,
place to fight, I say let her fight.
Again, if she wants to, go for it. But if she never, but I'm also not losing out on anything if she decides to walk away.
I like watching her fight, so I think I would be losing something.
Look, that's an individual thing. There's plenty of fighters that I feel I would be missing out on if they walked away that you might have no opinion on whatsoever.
I think you're upset because she knocked out Joanna.
I just don't find her all that interesting a fighter.
I think you still have an axe to grind there.
I most certainly do not.
So you say. McGregor's manager, Audiatar, tells ESPN McGregor fight announcement in the coming weeks. So whoever...
bull. Look, if you have an announcement, make an announcement. Until then, shut up. Connor's just trying to milk the news cycle.
It's kind of like when wrestling promotions are like, we have a big surprise coming up. You know, don't tell us there's a surprise coming. Just tell us when you're ready. Just tell us what it is, and don't tell us.
Or you know what? I'll even do you one. I'll give you 1 degree of separation.
Okay.
I'll give you 1. If you come out and say, "Hey, here's a date. Here's a press conference. We're announcing Connor's opponent and return date on this date. Show up and pay attention to that." This vagary about, yeah, we're negotiating something, and in the next few weeks it's imminent. Shut up. Give me a specific date. You're going to announce something specific, or shut up.
Okay. His manager also vehemently denies any allegation of sexual misconduct or any wrongdoing from his manager to ESPN. So,
of course he does.
Well, yes.
Well, look, if he is innocent, of course he's going to deny it because he's innocent. If he did it, he's going to deny it because he did it.
Well,
there's not too many people who come out and say, "Yeah, I did it." That's a statistically insignificant number of people who make that claim outside of the confines of the legal system.
I think that's about it, unless you have any other burning news we should get to.
Let's refresh Twitter, see if anything crazy happened.
Fury is open to the fight with Stipe, though, so there's that.
Again, Fury would get his $10 million paycheck to fight a guy who is vastly unqualified to be in the ring with him.
I mean,
I would do that too.
For that drubbing, Miocic would deserve a pot of gold, would he not?
He'd get whatever he could get.
Get embarrassed.
No. I mean that specifically. Look, he'd get whatever he could get for it, and whatever chunk, because the UFC is going to take a giant chunk of it.
B-side, he should get it. He should get a worthy chunk.
Yeah, you can argue that. You can also argue that he is the significantly less visible side of that equation.
Yeah. I'm not seeing too much other news-wise unless you have something you want to interject with.
Nah, again, nothing crazy looks like it broke over the last 30 minutes or so. Yeah. So let us go ahead and get into plugs.
Okay, so my latest movie reviews are for the Charlie's Angels remake. I mean, whatever. It was...
If you had fun, I'm glad you did.
I didn't need this movie. Like, I thought it was passable. I hated the McGee. Like, I always hated the McGee movies just because they were, like, ridiculous to me. And
the first one was a personal guilty pleasure for a while. Sure. The second one is abject trash.
I think both are abject. This was like, okay, I can accept watching this as, like, an amusement over the weekend. Ford versus Ferrari, fantastic movie. Is it one of the year's best? I mean, it was a great movie. James Mangold is a really talented filmmaker. Great performance by Christian Bale. Really, not, I would say, one of the best of his careers, but a solid performance by Matt Damon. Good movie. It looked good. The racing scenes were shot well. I recommend this film. I referenced it at the beginning of the show, but my next review will be Frozen 2. So be on the lookout for that.
I wish you good luck in going through that movie.
I saw it yesterday, and I had a great time.
All right, let me see. As for myself, last Tuesday, Mark Radulich and I got together to review Dr. Sleep, which I had a lot of fun with, apart from the ending, for a variety of reasons. You can listen to our review of that over at Damn You Hollywood, where I also make fun of Mark for being a giant weenie about horror movies again. And I will continue to do so. This week on Damn You Hollywood, Mark and I will be reviewing Ford v Ferrari, which I have not seen yet, but will be seeing before I review it. And somewhat looking forward to that discussion, if nothing else. Let's see, again, we will be off for the traditional show next week. However, I'm going to try something, I don't know what I'm going to call it, which is kind of a problem, but there was a somewhat interesting question I observed relative to an upcoming fight. I'm trying to remember. I think it was someone asked, I think it was Luke Thomas, who said he wasn't quite sure how Alexander Volkanovski beat Jose Aldo. Which is just to say there's a lot of tape study that needed to be done, what strategic decisions were made, what mechanisms did he use, not how in the world did this happen. And I think it's a fair question, so I'm going to take a stab at it next week. The audio will be released next week. I don't know when I'm going to record it at some point.
Beat Jose Aldo? Who didn't understand that fight?
Well, no. It's a question of mechanisms. Which specific strategic decisions are made? Which?
Oh, wait. So you're saying there wasn't someone who didn't understand why he won?
No. Yeah, it's not an issue of wait, how did that happen? It's more of okay, what did he do that caused him to win?
Okay, well that sounds fascinating.
So I'm going to take a stab at that, and it will only be audio. I do not yet have the ability to put video behind some of this stuff, so you're gonna have to just be stuck kind of listening to me, and hopefully I don't sound like a complete jackass. But I've done some tape study on Volkanovski. I've done historically a fair bit on Aldo, and I've looked at their fight, and I think I've got a few things that might potentially be relevant to that discussion. How it pertains to the Max Holloway fight, I'll try to tie some of that together, but it was a somewhat interesting question that I heard, and I figured, all right, you know what, I'll take a stab at it. Let me see what I can do. So that should be released again next Sunday at some point, and I'm going to try working from a script. So I will write out at least bullet points, and we'll see how that goes. You guys might think it's a giant waste of time, in which case it will be a one and done. If you like it, then I might try to do something like that a bit more often. We'll just have to kind of see how that goes. But that's it for me. There is no UFC event this Saturday or next Saturday for that matter. There's none the 23rd or the 30th. We will be back on the 1st of December to preview UFC on ESPN 7. This is their return to Washington, D.C. Main event was originally going to be Alistair Overeem and Walt Harris. Walt Harris obviously had to pull out of that fight after his stepdaughter went missing. Stepping in is Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who is suddenly poised for an enormous 2019 if he wins that fight. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks for that. Stay tuned for the technical breakdown. Again, I don't know what I'm going to call it. I'll come up with something. Even if it's just a ground and pound extra on whatever. Until then, thank you all again very much. We'll see you at a minimum in a couple of weeks. Until then, stay safe out there, and please continue to be well, be safe, and behave.